Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Extreme Sports Performance Podcast. My name is Ryan Blake. I'm the founder and CEO of Extreme Sports Performance. In this episode, I'm going to be speaking to Daz Drake. Daz is the Director of Athletic Performance Academy, APA Limited, and also the Head of Strength and Conditioning at Gosling and Sutton Tennis Academy in the UK. I've known Daz for over 10 years, and in this episode I'm going to be asking him the questions I ask all my guests. Who he is, what he does, where has he come from and what has he done along the way, what are the 3 key moments from his career so far, what are his 3 top areas of interest, what are the 3 most valuable things he's learned to date, who are his top 3 influencers, what are his top 3 resources for information, what are his top 3 sports performance exercises or drills, what are his top 3 pieces of advice in life, exercise and or sport, and where can people find him. We have a freestyle chat at the end, as I do with all my guests. We really enjoyed recording this episode. We hope you enjoy listening to it. Here we go. On the line, I have Daz Drake. Daz, how you doing today?
Good morning, buddy. All good here.
Thanks for joining us, mate. You were definitely one of the first cohort of people I wanted to get on. Obviously, we've known each other for quite a long time. Could you just tell the listeners, if they don't know, who you are and what you do, and just a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I'll just keep this one short, but obviously you can ask me some more questions if you want me to elaborate. But I guess I would be best known for working in tennis, which is where we're connected from back in the days when you were also head of S&C at another tennis academy. So I'm principally head of S&C at Gosling Tennis Academy and Sutton Tennis Academy. So that takes up a fair amount of my time. And off the back of that and the work that I've done in tennis, I set up a company called Athletic Performance Academy in 2010 with a view to replicating the work that initially I was doing personally, but then obviously the work that I was leading with the coaches that were under my command, if you like, at Gosling and then more recently Sutton. So yeah, the company is really inspired by the coaching that I've been leading at those tennis academies with a view to replicating it and offering it and sharing it with as many people who are passionate about S&C and tennis as I am.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Daz. It's a great intro. Before we met each other, which I think was around about 2008. So you know, a good 10 years ago. What was your kind of career journey or your education pathway that had led you to that point from where you started out?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I'm going to probably say a couple of things that hopefully will be, you know, something that you haven't heard before, and you might not hear again, because I'm actually going to be honest and tell you that I went into the S&C industry, and then I initially went out of it, and I initially thought that I wasn't going to come back in, so maybe it'll be interesting for people to know how that happened and why I got back in. But essentially, I did all the things that a lot of us have done and will continue to do, which means to go to university. I did a sports science degree. I did it at a time when strength and conditioning didn't exist as an industry, and it certainly didn't exist as a degree. So I graduated with my master's degree in 2004, and having done all of the usual things, qualified as a gym instructor, done a lot of sports coaching, particularly in football.
Yep.
But I have to say, I learned quite quickly that I probably wasn't destined to be an elite football coach. That was just something that was kind of obvious to me quite early. So when I graduated from my masters and I was doing this part-time football coaching, I wasn't really sure what my next step was. I had a sports massage diploma and I was wondering if I was going to go down that route, but I knew that I wanted probably to get into some kind of physical training role, and particularly with athletes, you wanted to get fit for sport. So I really got the opportunity to go into tennis just through a chance meeting at the inaugural UKCA Strength and Conditioning Association in 2005, and that was how I got into tennis initially, because the person that I was chatting to at the conference was the head of S&C at Gosling Tennis Academy at the time, and he invited me in. He was impressed by the fact that I was an inexperienced coach but had gone to this conference, and I did some interning with him over the summer, and it just turned out that he happened to leave, and so the tennis director asked if I could step into his shoes. So that's how I got into the tennis role. But just going back to my initial point about why I initially was going to leave it, was because the year before that I actually had the opportunity to do a part-time contract in my final year of my master's degree at another tennis academy, and I did it for a couple of months, and I just realised I was way out of my depth. You know, having done 5 years at university and postgraduate, I consider myself to be fairly knowledgeable about sports science and physiology, but when it came down to it, the reality was I actually knew very little about programming for elite athletes, and I panicked. I didn't feel that I was going to be representing that tennis academy well enough, and I didn't have enough belief or confidence in myself that I could do a good enough job. So I actually kind of voluntarily, resigned from that position after about 3 months. And there was a moment where I wasn't sure I was going to get back into S&C, but the trigger for that was that I went on the inaugural UKCA. Well, it wasn't UKCA then, but it was their very first pilot 2-day Olympic weightlifting weekend at Stirling University, December 2004. I remember it, like the back of my hand, with Gil Stevenson and Clive Brewer taking it, and that was their pilot for the very first UKCA workshop that we know now, and that just basically relit my fire, gave me some confidence, because prior to that I didn't know how to do Olympic weightlifting. And then obviously, as I said, I met up with the tennis trainer the following summer, and I kind of convinced myself that I was ready to get back on the horse.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Daz. That's really interesting. I didn't actually know that. So I've definitely learnt something there. I can completely agree with you when you talk about getting into a new environment in a new role, with fairly low level of experience, and feeling a little bit kind of at your depth, because I've been there, several times, several different environments and several different roles, and it's pretty intimidating. And I feel that the one thing that is better now, but especially about 10 years ago, the one thing that S&C didn't have a lot was a lot of support. Like, you're kind of pretty much on your own, and that made it very difficult. I was very lucky when I started working in tennis, just after I met you, that that British Tennis, the LTA, had a strength and conditioning coordinators who would come and support you and kind of help you with any questions.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
But I know that has been quite rare and still is quite rare today, but it's not a nice place to be, mate, so I can relate to that. So I'm just going to move on to next question. So as I'm sure you know, quite a lot of these questions are kind of top 3 questions.
Yeah.
So the first one I have for you, and you may have already mentioned this already, what would you say the top 3 key moments are from your career so far to date?
Well, it is a difficult question to ask. I mean, from my own, are we talking like coaching moments, or more just like experiences that I've had professionally, or just qualifications that I've achieved that I've been proud of, or all of the above?
Either or. So anything that you feel that the key moments that you feel that you've had the most successes, or the biggest failures, or gain the most experience from.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll be the first person to say that I think we always learn most from our failures, or the things that we perhaps know that we could have done better. And I think the important thing I always say to myself, and I say it to my team, is I will forgive people for making genuine kind of human errors and mistakes if their intent was always good. And I continue to make mistakes myself, but I always say try not to make the same mistake twice. So I've definitely learned a lot from working with elite players and also developmental players. And I guess it would be easy for me to say the kind of the glamorous aspect of the role, where I do get to occasionally go to Wimbledon, and I've always enjoyed being around that environment. We've got the grass court season approaching, thick and fast, and I'm sure that I'll be very privileged to go again and watch one of our top professional players. We should have a representative. I say we. Gosling Tennis Academy, one of the academies I'm contracted to do the SSC with, they will have a pro probably in the men's, the women's, and the doubles, and it's always nice. That's always a highlight of the role. But the personal reward I get, I wouldn't necessarily put it down to one moment, but I really enjoy the mentoring aspect of what I do with coaches that are coming through, and I always find I get a personal satisfaction from having to unfortunately let one of my coaches go, but because they're going on to bigger and, let's say, not better things, because I'm always biased. I always think my environment's the best place to learn, but it's a full-time job in a prestigious role like a head of S&C of a higher education university, or a professional football or cricket academy, things like that. I always get a huge satisfaction to think that that person has been someone I've been able to inspire and influence and help them, hopefully, to put themselves in the best possible driving seat to interview well. And those are the kind of little and often moments that I wouldn't say is a particular one that I want to to highlight, because that would be unfair to some of the coaches. But yeah, it's always great when you can look back and think how much of an impact you can have if you really are passionate about coaching excellence and helping people ultimately go from being part-time volunteer to maybe a full-time professional coach.
I completely agree, and it's quite a nice addition to coaching athletes, is also coaching coaches, or at least trying to let them avoid the potholes that you've stepped in yourself, and to see them develop. I also get quite a lot of pleasure in that, and it's just very enjoyable. And I'm grateful for the people in the past who've helped me in the same way. So it's nice to be able to pass that on. Really, it's quite a nice part about the industry that I think is important. So next question, Daz. What would you say and this can be as a strength and conditioning coach, as a sports scientist, or just as a all-round kind of performance enhancement kind of guru, but what would you say the top three areas of interest you have are right now as a professional?
Yeah, well, I tell you, the goalposts often move, because I do get my attention kind of like shifted based on things I'm reading and people I'm speaking to. And I have to say, this is probably a reflection of my own business strategies, which I'm learning. You've got to be a little bit more specific. I'm quite a stubborn person, and I like to call myself a specialist generalist, which what I mean by that is I like to feel that I know a little bit about everything, and I enjoy learning about everything to do with strength and conditioning and sports science. But of course, when you're running a business, I think sometimes if you try and talk about everything and speak about everything, you speak to no one. So getting back to your point, my main interest is obviously strength and conditioning for tennis, but more specifically, I guess my top three areas would be culture, as it relates to developing winning cultures and obviously team cultures, and I have a personal passion for that, because I'm trying to create a brand that is based on replicating coaching excellence in a strength and conditioning company. So I'm very interested in learning about human values and beliefs, and how that obviously impacts on behaviours, because I'm not trying to clone coaches. I don't want robots, and I'm certainly not trying to get people to all have the same kind of temperament and communication style as I do, because God forbid we don't want 50 of those kind of people going around. But I'm very interested in that and trying to figure out how to get the best out of my coaches with their own natural traits and temperaments. But related to the physical aspect, I would say I'm always interested in coordination training for youth athletes, because I think it's poorly understood. I think that it's not as simple as to just say that skill development is at the domain of the sports coach. If you take tennis, for example, there's a lot of people that would rightly say tennis is one of the most highly demanding skill-based hand-eye coordination sports. But of course, there's plenty of things that we can do to develop an athlete's rhythm and balance and coordination, and so that's something that I'm really interested in, and I think it's fun as well for the kids. And probably the other thing that I'm known for is sport-specific speed. So I think speed coaching is also something that's not as well understood and as well coached, certainly in my experience, and definitely in tennis. And I'm not a tennis coach, I'm definitely not an ex-player, but I've made it my kind of personal kind of crusade to look like someone who moves like a tennis player, and can certainly coach someone at the highest level to move better as a tennis player. So those would be my three passions, I would say.
Awesome. No, thanks for that, Daz. I think all of those I completely agree with. Like, culture is so important no matter where you are, whether that's in a performance environment or education environment or academy environment. So it's key. And the other thing that you mentioned about teaching movement or teaching kids how to move properly is one thing which, even today, I mean, I've been working with youth athletes for over 10 years, like yourself, and it's still one thing today that's missed in quite a lot of places I go to, and it surprises me so much. But it's such an important asset for them to be able to possess, and it's not difficult to be able to get them to understand it. I think you just have to have the patience to invest in it in the first place.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
But and then once other coaches or teachers start seeing the value in that, then it goes on from there. Awesome. Well, thanks for that, mate. That's really a great start to your top threes. What would you say, just moving on from that, would be the top three most valuable things you've learned? Kind of as a strength and conditioning coach, as a sports scientist, or as a performance enhancement specialist?
Well, I think there's always two aspects to, at least in my mind, to being a really effective coach. And there's the what you're going to coach, so the training principles that you're following, and then obviously the method that is a result of those principles. Of course, that's something that's really important, and as far as that goes, that's one aspect. But then the other thing is important is the how you coach, and so that's something that I'm also very interested in looking at, and that has evolved for me. That's constantly evolving for me over the years about both what I believe is the most important things to coach, and then also the most important ways in which to coach them. So those are the kind of things that are quite important to me. Could you just do me a favour, because I literally just had a kind of like a blank spot. Could you just repeat that question so I can make sure I can answer it properly?
Yeah, 100%. So what are the top three most valuable things that you've learned?
Yeah, so with respect to, so where I'm going with that is with the training philosophy. One of the most important things I've learned is that it's just your beliefs can change, and you're always doing the best that you can do at that moment in time. It's just a moment in time, and I used to be a perfectionist, Ryan. I'm not sure if that ever came across, but I say used to be because I found it was quite limiting for me, because I was so concerned about everything being kind of historically correct that I could look back on something in 10 years and be satisfied that it was perfect then and it's still going to be perfect now. And one of the things I've learned is that nothing is ever going to be perfect. And even if something is as good as it can be in that moment, it's probably going to evolve. Most certainly it's going to evolve. And what you believe to be true and correct in the best of what you would do now with your athlete 10 years ago, it's probably not going to be what you would do 10 years later. And that's okay, because we're always evolving. So, I don't know if I've got 3 things I've learned about training philosophy, but in terms of principles of just, understanding that, with my perfectionism as a trait that I had developed at university, because I got rewarded for that at uni, I think in the real world you have to be a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more agile and be prepared to move with current thinking and best practice. So, yeah, that's my big learning in terms of principles and how I've tried to develop my coaching. With respect to something that I've learned on the other aspect that I was talking about, like how to coach, I do think that in certain environments there are different types of personalities that suit different environments, and I always try and recruit now for character. I used to recruit for knowledge, and I used to recruit for knowledge and experience, and they're still important. They're still very important, because we have a duty to provide a level of excellence of coaching which in part is based on what we know and our ability to kind of get results. So that's still really important to me. But as I'm going through just like another coaching interview process literally this week, I'm actually thinking that I've learned that I'm really coaching for character first, for personal character, and then coaching experience and knowledge second, because as I'm getting bigger and I'm recruiting more coaches, the problems I have when the coaches are not delivering well is not the template that I'm giving them, if I'm giving them a template at all. It's the way in which they're coaching it, and I think it's really, really important to get the right people on the bus that have the right values and beliefs, and then obviously that's aligns then with the behaviours that you want to see in your coaches. And I'm always trying to learn how I can make better decisions more quickly, to find people that have got those inspirational qualities and have got good character. So if you've got some tips on what you do as well when you're bringing on your staff, I can share with you how I do it. But I'm learning all the time how I can get better at getting the right people on the bus, and also how I can hopefully align with what they want and what they value as an individual, because I'm not employing these staff, they're self-employed, so I can't expect them to sign and their name in blood and be with me for 10, 20 years. And I need to try and figure out how I can learn to align my kind of selfish values as to wanting APA to have a presence in the British tennis community and everything that I think is important to me, and then obviously how I can leverage that and balance that with what an individual coach who's coming to work for APA wants, both now and in their own career. So that's a big learning curve for me.
Awesome, Daz. Thanks for sharing that. I can really find value in what you just said there, and I don't think there's really any strength and conditioning coaches I know that don't really have some kind of strive for perfectionism or form of OCD, because it's a lot of the coaches that I've worked with in the past have to be very structured, have to be very organised, and they're often, especially those in high performance settings, are very results driven. And I find that can sometimes change the systems and processes you choose to follow along the way. Whereas if you're more trying to achieve more developmental success or educational success, then you're less results driven. Those systems and processes you can adapt or adhere to along the way don't necessarily have to be the same, even though some of them might be. And that's the one thing I struggled with transitioning from academy to pro sport to education over the last 12 years, is the way I did things had to change. I couldn't do things the same way in all of those 3 different environments. So that was a big learning curve. So I completely understand that. And your point about choosing who you want to work with or who you want to work for you. Again, I think the one thing I've learned when it comes to interviewing other coaches or graduates who are doing work placements or internships is you have to allow a lot of time for that process to occur, because it takes so much longer, I found, than you initially think it does. And I used to think I'll interviewing 2, 3, 4 candidates, you'll find the right one, but now it's more of a case of 10, 12, 15 candidates before you find the right one, and that's largely driven by who you want to be working with, and can they understand your training philosophy, and do you feel that you're going to be able to work with this person effectively, or can you trust them to work by themselves? Over how much do they know? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's always a balance with everything, because I sometimes know that I'm and I'll go on the record and say this, because this is my belief. I know that I can't compete with some of the organisations that want to charge quite a good hourly rate for maybe 5 or 10 hours of work a week, but I can look them in the eye and say, look, I'm not going to compete on that. If you want to come in this building and ask for £30 an hour, you're not going to get it here. But what you are going to get is, as close as I can to guaranteeing that you're going to improve significantly as a coach, because that's just what I am going to be here to help you do, and this is what I'm passionate about. And also, some of the things that you're asking them to do and to experience are going to be added value that is not measured in financial remuneration, but it's got a value in another way. But of course, there is a bottom line. People have to earn money. People have to make sure that they're getting what they need to be able to survive. And then you just have to kind of make decisions about whether someone is going to be really worth an extra investment, because maybe they're just an exceptional person, and the time that they're going to save you by just being really, really good, not just as a coach, but as a potential mentor of other inexperienced coaches, and just a good person to have around your organisation who's going to go over and above what the actual role is. Then you can potentially make some exceptions to the rule and things like that. But I definitely recruit on character first, and I always try and see how I can balance what I would like them to do for my company with what I want, and so with what they value and what they need out of their next role in their kind of career.
I think one thing I've just thought of, mate, was you asked me if I had any tips or advice when it comes to kind of successfully trying to recruit or get on board staff or coaches. And the one thing that I've realised that I've done more lately than less is to not give them too much information, is to keep the brief quite simple and fairly vague, and see how they come back on that. So whether it's a job description or an interview process, the main points are involved in that, but how they present themselves or I suppose highlight themselves or express themselves is largely down to them. And I feel that the coaches with most character, or the ones who are positively different, are the ones that present themselves in the better way. And it's not just like, as you say, like almost in a robot format. It's they present themselves as they usually end up coaching. Yeah. And I find that there's a direct link with that. So I don't know, have you come across that before?
Yeah, I do the same thing. I always do a practical interview. I always give them a theme, but what I won't do is give them the program of the group that are already. I won't just say, look, come in and do a strength session and here's the program, because then they're not taking any ownership over their own ideas. They're just coming in and they're following an existing program. And something that I heard from another coach, I'm not going to say his name because I can't 100% recall it was that coach, but what was said was, when you go into an interview, there's a lot of people that have come from big places, big football academies, big rugby academies, maybe have worked with big companies like Exos, I've gone to America and done all of the mentorship program and that. They come in and you go, right, what would you think is the way that we should be preparing tennis players? Or what would you do? What they're actually telling me is, well, what would Exos do?
Yeah.
And let me talk you through the mentorship program 1 to 3 level. And I'm like, that's great, but that's their system. I want to know what you think, because for me that's gutsy, and it shows that they've actually got some independent thought processes, and that they'd also be able to reflectively kind of appraise what they've already learned, and then what they want to now put into their own training system, and how that could perhaps, that kind of critical thinking and that reflective practice could actually enhance my training system, because I don't just want someone to blindly follow. I want someone to look at it and go, well, actually, I think these things are really important for tennis, and are you doing them? And I'll be like, crikey, okay, I don't know, am I? And I'll be like, all right, this is interesting, because I want someone to challenge me, respectively, and obviously, I will still reserve the right to potentially go or not go with that idea. But if they've got a polite but kind of well-intended way to challenge me and go, well, actually, I think this is really important in tennis, and I've seen it being done in this environment, and I think this could work in tennis. What do you think? I'll be like, yeah, okay, that's interesting, rather than you just telling me what you just did in your Exos mentorship for the last 6 months.
Sure. I think it's interesting, isn't it, how some people, I mean, I was guilty of this when I first started out, but trying to let people know how much you know, is thinking that was what they wanted to hear, when it actually isn't. It's exactly what you just said. It's, in this environment, or this particular organisation or group of athletes, like how would you go about it, and what's the best way of achieving the goal for here, for these guys, not where you've just learnt everything. Yeah. So I completely understand that.
By the way, that's the reason why I originally kind of voluntarily resigned from that first position, because I was given that autonomy to go and take some principles and apply it. Yeah. And I didn't have that point in time, especially when I was a perfectionist and wanted to feel like my philosophy was watertight, was impenetrable, and was perfect. I just was nowhere near being able to formulate any kind of theoretical or actual training process that was my own, and I just felt so uncomfortable. And at that point, there wasn't a very rigid template that I could just kind of follow and build confidence from, that I was just like, okay, I'm not ready to do this. Certain people are very comfortable with, they don't know what they don't know, and it doesn't panic them, because they're quite happy to just learn on the job and pick things up, and I do that now much more readily with new information and new aspects. But as an inexperienced coach, when I was 21 to 25, there was no way that I was learning on the job like that, because I was a perfectionist, and all I wanted to know was, am I right? And is this good? And I just couldn't quite do that kind of role. I needed to go into a role that was a little bit less stressful, with less advanced players, and a little bit safer, and that was why going back into the tennis academy a year later was helpful, because initially it was part-time work that I was balancing with teaching in a further education college, and it was with, and they won't mind me saying, sub-elite players at that point. And then obviously very quickly that tennis academy grew with me, and it was perfect, because it was only 1 year old when I started, and so 13 years later that academy's 14 years old, and now we've got at least the Gosling I'm talking about, players that are from 5 years old to 30 years old, and they're professional. So it's, I just wanted to kind of like close the loop and go full circle on that, because I think it's really important.
Sure. No, thanks for sharing that, Daz. That's really useful, and it's it's great that it's worked out that way. I do think that good.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
People with good intentions end up, having good results and good things happening to them. And it's great that's the case. So we've obviously, just moving on, like we know lots of people that we've worked with or work with or listen to, at conferences, workshops, seminars, podcasts, blogs, you name it. And there's a lot of influence out there in the industry. Who would you say that your main influences are? Doesn't necessarily have to be top three. You can be if you want, or it can be more than that. Who would you say the main people are kind of influence you or help shape your coaching practice to date?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I've always got a couple of people that I'm kind of, I'll give a shout out for, because I do genuinely think that they've kind of helped with my, let's say, insecurities and perfectionism, and just made me feel like a little bit more settled in some of the knowledge aspect. And again, apologies, because there's literally hundreds of people that I've got gratitude for, that have helped me in one way or another. But if I'm just going to call out and shout out a few people, one person I've never actually met, but just because of the crossover between baseball and tennis, I got into Eric Cressy's blog when he was only just writing it himself. Early days when he started his first performance training centre up in Boston, and I was following his blog. I came across him incidentally through Mike Boyle, who you could probably say is up there too, because he was famous for talking about why he doesn't squat his hockey players, and I'm sure most people who are familiar with the strength and conditioning industry have heard of both of those names, or you certainly should do if you haven't. And he was quite controversial because he was talking about why he stopped doing bilateral back squatting with his hockey players, and then that kind of got me onto his network. And in America, everyone who does those Perform Better seminars, those kind of conferences, those road shows that they take around the States.
Yeah.
Well, Eric Cressy was kind of the new kid on the block, and so through Mike Boyle, I came across Eric Cressy, and I just started reading his baseball blogs and thought, shit, this is a... Sorry, I hope you can swear a little bit.
No, it's fine, mate. You swear away. No problem.
I was like, shit, okay. I thought I knew a certain amount of information about tennis. This guy, is the closest thing to a non-qualified, sports medicine expert, but he's just making me think, wow, there's a lot of information out there that he understands, and you've got to get that balance, because we're not orthopedic surgeons and we're not sports medicine practitioners. We're strength and conditioning coaches. Our job first and foremost is to get them strong enough to manage the physical demands of the sport. But there's a moment in time where knowing about the specific demands on the shoulder and the back and the hip, and as he clearly did on baseball, was like, okay, shit, there's information that I've got to kind of get my head around, because he clearly understands baseball better than I did understand tennis at that point in time. And it just kind of like lit my fire a little bit and got me really inspired to go and learn a bit more. So he's one guy, and I still follow his information, but as you all know, when you're running a business, you can't spend all of your time reading someone else's business blogs and everything else, because you never get your own stuff done. So I don't read it quite as much, but I still try and get some of his information as much as I can. So he's one person. And then Ian Jeffries is another person. I think most of us in the UK, and certainly in the States as well, will have heard of Ian Jeffries, because he's a great guy, and he's been an integral member of the UKCA as a board member and as one of the lead kind of tutors. And he was someone who inspired me and gave me a lot of confidence from his ability to create a technical model for coaching speed. And obviously, notwithstanding that there's hundreds of fantastic coaches in track and field like Dan Path that are very good at doing that, but he was the one who kind of introduced game speed and how to coach, let's just say agility for want of a better word, and how to coach change of direction, and what are some of the technical cues that are important, and how they differentiate whether you're sprinting forwards, to the side, backwards, etc., etc. So that book that he released called Game Speed came out at a good time for me when I was trying to formalise an APA method for speed, where I could actually quantify the different speed mechanics, give it a name, give it some teaching points, and then go and have confidence to go and talk to my coaches that I'm working with, say, right, this is how I want you to describe it to the athlete, and when we're talking about first step speed, it's going to have these main things that I want you to be focusing on. So that gave me a lot of confidence. And then as far as like people that have influenced me, not out of a book or out of a blog, but just face to face, there's so many people. I mean, I have got to give a shout out to my former tennis director, Matt Wilcox, who until last year was running Gosling Tennis Academy. He was the closest thing I've had to a day-to-day mentor, along with Sergio, who's the head of sports science and medicine at Gosling. These two guys are my day-to-day mentors and have helped me in my career. And then as a sort of an additional S&C coach, just from a personality standpoint, and someone that kind of helped me, last person, and you know this guy very well, Ben Haining, because he was the person that you're describing when he used to come into he used to work for the LTA and be that strength and conditioning national coach that would come in and have a look at the program that I was running and give me advice. And I have to say, Ryan, as you've probably said it already, that was the only time I ever had someone do that. Yeah. It happened for about 2 years. It was really good, and more of that kind of support from a national governing body in tennis academies would be welcome, and I hope that the LTA will think about doing something like that in the future. I know that they're looking at setting up national academies again, and I imagine that they'll pump most of their expertise into those national academies and possibly to some of the regional academies. But at that point in time, it was great to have him, and as a person and as a bloke, and you know him well. It basically just pumped up my tyres and energised me. Some people just do that, don't they?
I think it's so important, and as you're absolutely right. I mean, but when if someone was to ask me the question I've just asked you, he's the first person I'd mention. He's a big influencer on me, and apart from his terrible taste in jokes, he's a great bloke, and it's just such a comfort and a support to have that professional who's got that slightly more experience. There if you need him, and it's very rare. I think when I was involved in county cricket, like the ECB were very good at that. Pete Atkinson, who I'm sure you know, moved from the EIS to the ECB, and he did a great job in setting up that kind of inter-county strength and conditioning coach development kind of framework, really, and really getting it off the ground, and that was again a great support.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
And that was more all the coaches coming together in one place to chew the fat, to learn new things, rather than particular coaches from that governing body going to their facilities to kind of offer whatever was needed. But either way, whatever way it's done, it's really good, and I completely agree. I think more governing bodies should definitely look to try and do that, and I'm sure there are ones that we're unaware of that do. Apologies if anyone's listening and that you're thinking, well, hold on, we do that. Well, great, get in touch and let us know, because we feel that it's so important. Awesome, Daz. Well, thanks for that. That's, again, great answers. So just moving on from there, so that we've talked about influence, but I now want to talk about information. So obviously, there's a lot of information out there in all forms. What would you say your top 3 resources are for good quality, up-to-date information that you use regularly?
Yeah, well, if you remember, I said I used to kind of like to call myself a specialist generalist, so at times I've jumped all over the place to learn as much as I can about everything that interests me. Nowadays, I'm being a little bit less stubborn. I don't think that's bad, by the way, and I think that still is important, but just because of the nature of where my expertise is and my reputation is, and it is in tennis, I'm not saying I'm becoming more closed-minded and I'm not like just focusing on tennis, but increasingly I think it's important to have a little kind of coaching community where you can bounce ideas off each other. And certainly in tennis, someone who's got a similar way of thinking to myself and a similar philosophy. Again, I don't want to upset people by not naming certain people, but more recently I've been chewing the fat more with Howard Green and Matt Krizdov, who's based in Germany. But these are strength and conditioning coaches who are tennis specialists, and I don't think they would be offended if I was to label them that either. And that's quite nice because it's the closest thing that I've had in the last few years to the kind of the network, that community of coaches working in S&C in tennis. And there's lots of other coaches, by the way, that I try and touch base with as well at the different academies from time to time. And apologies I've not mentioned them all, but if I try and do that now, I'll run out of time. But they're people that I recently spoke to, and again, no egos. So I will more than happy to admit that there'll be certain things that they will have more experience or knowledge in than me, and probably vice versa. So it's just about sharing, and it's not about egos, and we just kind of like build each other up and pump each other's tires up by sounding off some ideas. But those are the sort of people that I speak to on a day-to-day basis. And then in terms of like where I get my inspiration, it just comes in different forms, and it depends on what I'm interested in at that point in time, right? I mean, sometimes I'll read about things that I have no intention of necessarily putting into my training system, but I just want to be able to at least know enough about it so I can make a decision if I'm going to accept it or reject it, or potentially add it in some form. So quite interested in some of the physical therapy type modalities that kind of filter into S&C, and you think, is that got a place, and things like that. But I wouldn't say anything massive that's regularly in my toolbox that I go to. But just to give you a few ideas, I recently, it sounds like I'm promoting people, but I'm not, because I don't have any relationship with these people. But I recently got into a bit of boxing science information. So there's a company called Boxing Science, and it's run by some guys up in Sheffield who specifically work in boxing and in Sheffield, believe it or not. And they put a nice little product together called the Youth Athlete Edition, Train Like a Champion. Check that out. I recommend it. It was good. I enjoyed that. I read that. And also just try and get in on top of the UKCA conference notes. So the last thing that I read was Dan Baker's conference notes using velocity measures to improve resistance training, programming, coaching. And to be honest, I'm still trying to get my head around how much I want to use velocity-based training in the day-to-day work with the day-to-day athletes I have. I'm not romantic about the idea of doing it or not doing it. I just think it has to add value. And one of the things that I'm interested in is that. And I haven't made my mind up yet, Ryan, if I'm honest, how I'm going to do it. I like to use it for power profiling a lot. I like to get an idea of where someone's capabilities are at producing force on different parts of the force velocity curve. And I like using the GymAware accelerometer to determine how much speed that they can produce at the speed end of the curve. And then I like obviously measuring at the other end of the curve to determine their 3RM and predict their 1RM. So that's something that I'm into and I'm trying to learn more about and just think where it fits. And then probably there's a few other things that I haven't mentioned, but the one thing that I want to get more information, and if someone outside of tennis can give me a heads up, I'm trying to get more information on accelerometer data, like GPS, mechanical loading data for acceleration, deceleration in tennis, because I think we're a little bit behind the curve in terms of other sports, but there's a reason for that. But I'm definitely I want to get more information on how to use the accelerometers and the GPS units for tennis players. And I know that Andy Murray has started to do some stuff with Catapult. I know that there's some good stuff in Germany going on, but yeah, I'm willing to learn, and that's just putting a shout out. So if anyone is doing some good stuff with GPS units and particularly Catapult, for example, get in touch.
Cool. I'll definitely have a little ask around, Daz. I can't really offer you much help there myself. Most of the GPS data I'm kind of got my head into at the moment in rugby union, rugby sevens. We haven't really started using that in our tennis program yet. So I'll definitely get back to you on that. But yeah, if anyone's listening, please get in touch, and I'll ask you, Daz, how people can get in touch with you at the end. So that makes that nice and link nice and easy and smooth. So just the last couple of questions, mate. So that this next one I ask always puts people under pressure because it's quite difficult to narrow down three. But what would you say your kind of your top three sports performance exercises or drills are that your go-tos or you use more regularly than others?
Yeah, well, I'm not gonna duck the question, but I'm just gonna kind of have a few caveats. But I'll be honest with you, and you might be thinking, shit, someone who's got 15 years experience, you're still like debating some of these things, But it's more just to constantly reflect. But listen, I am someone who is a bit more, let's say, like classically trained on the Eastern European model of linear periodization, and I'm always trying to evolve some really good quality principles of linear periodization that works for sports that only have to peak once or twice a year, like athletics, and evolving those training principles in a more concurrent methodology that's better fit for a sport like tennis, where you have to be not at your...
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Peak, but you're probably going to be at 80% of your peak most of the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to think about how certain training exercises will evolve in the tweaks of the program as I go from, let's say, an earlier preparation period to a late preparation period. And in tennis, that could be week 1 to week 3, or it could be week 1 to week 6, depending on whether you're talking about a mini training block or an off season. And so, to answer your question, I'm a big fan of bilateral heavy squatting. When I say heavy, that's obviously in inverted commas what is heavy and appropriate for that athlete. And of course, they need to have an extensive training history. But I'm a fan of it. I will try and get them to go parallel in the earlier part of their preparation period. I will try and get them to go closer towards the 3 to 5 RM mark. And I haven't been convinced yet completely with the literature that it would be smart to take out bilateral squatting for tennis, and so that's my big one. As far as if we just kind of surf the curve a little bit, going down more towards the kind of power area, I do like Olympic weightlifting. I do it myself. I'm not very strong at it, but I am competent at it, and that's one of the benefits of doing the UKC accreditation. You have to be competent at it, but I will use it and derivatives of it with tennis players if I can, but there's a lot of tennis players that can't do it and won't be able to do it because they've got a lot of restrictions around their back and their shoulder and their wrists. But if I can't do the Olympic weightlifts, then I'm quite a fan of like singles, like cluster training sets of jump squats. But of course you've got heavy spinal loading, so I don't really ever go more than a maximum like body weight. So for an 80 kilogram athlete, probably going up to about 80 kilograms, where they'll do a jump squat. They will dip into a counter movement, explode out, and then land in a ready position, and then reset and do singles, as opposed to repetitive jump squats with a much lighter bar that you do for more like reactive, explosive qualities down the speed end. So that's a big part of my program. And then the last one I'm going to say, which I'm not going to give the answer, but this is more of a question for us all to think about, is I came across someone who is doing some quite specific training in cricket, and you'll appreciate this. They're called Stephen Jones, and he's doing some stuff at Wellington School. Have you come across this guy?
Yeah. I've never met Stefan, but I do follow him on Instagram, and quite often watch what he's putting out.
Yeah. So I can't comment because again, I've never met the guy, and I haven't really studied his training philosophy enough. But what I do notice, and I think it's something for us to reflect on, is there's a part of his program that speaks to the exercise classification that has kind of been very popularised in track and field. So, like Bondarchuk's classification of general preparatory, specific preparatory. And when I say Bondarchuk, I probably need to also talk about Vergashansky, because he's probably even more the proponent of this. But general preparatory, then specific development, and then you finally get to the competitive exercise. Well, with his specific development exercises, he has a whole cluster of isometric training methods that are built around being able to accept extremely high forces on the front leg at the point of release of the bowling action. And I'm just now thinking about, are there elements of sport-specific movements in tennis that we could potentially better utilise to potentially augment skill acquisition in the specific attractor states, if I'm going to quote like Franz Bosch and the motor skill principles. Is there something that I can be doing in terms of corrective strength exercise to augment skill learning that are safe, that will meet some of the requirements that I will have to discuss with the head of sports science and sports medicine surgery? And how does that fit? Because I don't do a lot of that stuff, if I'm honest, Ryan. I don't do a lot of weighted ball stuff and isometric stuff in very tennis-specific positions, or light medicine ball work. And I'm just saying, why don't I? And should I be? And what is the impact of adding that into the program? And does that mean that if I add that, I have to take away something else? And what's the impact? So I am kind of ducking the last one, because if you ask me what do I do for that kind of specific type stuff with tennis, I'm quite known for doing a lot of resisted explosive bungee work around footwork, and it has its place for me because it's a good way of getting some anaerobic power adaptations that kind of get closer to the speed strength, where you've got either a bungee or you've got a weight vest, or maybe both, medicine ball, that kind of stuff. I like doing that down at the bottom end of the speed power part of the curve. But I just thought I'd throw that out because I don't have an answer for you. I haven't decided whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I know that Alex Natera has done similar stuff in track and field, trying to lock in those end stage foot contact positions at top speed with track and field athlete sprinters, and using isometric pushes against pins and things like that. And so, I'm just throwing it out there, see what people think.
Really interesting you should mention that, because a lot of the research that I've been reading lately, especially this year, and a lot of other podcasts I've been listening to, I'm hearing more and more people talk about the importance of isometrics, and that mainly that in terms of track and field events, but also in sports now like basketball and baseball, and especially at collegiate level or like university level. I'm hearing about it more and more, especially extreme isometrics. It's definitely given me food for thought. I personally used a lot of various forms of isometric holds on glute hand benches with fast bowlers I've worked with in the past, and that was incredibly valuable and was a great injury prevention tool. So that's it's interesting for you to say. I think I still haven't made my mind up really about my philosophy there, or kind of where I would fit it into my kind of programming. But it's definitely, especially with the new athletes I assess, it's definitely something one of the first things I would look at, and it's definitely something I would do on a regular basis. Not despite the sport. So it's a very open topic for me at the moment. So I'm glad it's also up there in your current mindset, Daz. Let's continue to touch base about that.
Yeah, no problem.
So just to wrap up, mates, we're coming up to an hour. So I don't want to keep you for any longer. What what advice would you give to someone starting out in the strength and conditioning industry? He's maybe just finishing up at university or just graduated and looking to get a role, not necessarily in performance sport, maybe in education or development. What tips or advice would you potentially give them if they asked you?
Yeah, well, I think I'm probably going to say something similar to what a lot of us would say in the industry, because it's good advice and it just makes sense. But there is one aspect is to get your knowledge and skills to a level where if you're getting in front of someone who knows a bit, if you're working with an elite athlete who's probably had in their career at least 3 to 5 coaches, of course, get your knowledge and skills up. And we're not mentioning it on this podcast so much, but you've probably heard me go on about it in the past that I need to be satisfied that university academic education is still giving them, enough practical experience of the skills that they need to be good at coaching, like Olympic weightlifting and all these kind of speed stuff. So, we'll park that for this one. We can get back on that soapbox another time, but presupposing that they're going into a good academic environment, and there are some good universities that have got a very practical element of strength and conditioning degrees. So presupposing they've got good knowledge and skills, they can get in front of an elite athlete and know what they're talking about, then I would be saying get your experience in earlier than what currently people are doing. Make sure that you're getting your internship, like free type work. And again, that's another thing we haven't talked about, but let's just say for now it's voluntary and they're doing it when they're 18, 19, 20. Don't be trying to do it when you've graduated from your master's degree. Go in and shadow the local cricket team or the local rugby team, or go and offer to do the warm-up, so that by the time you've left uni, you've done all of that stuff. You've built up an experience level. And to be fair, from most of the CVs that I'm kind of seeing from people that are graduating university now, they've done that. It's clear that they've done a lot of those, kind of paid their dues, paid forward in their university rather than doing it after. But there's still a lot that have got a master's and they still haven't got significant coaching. And I'm like, what are you doing? And then linked to that, I just say, understand that some things don't change. It's still, rightly or wrongly, more about who you know, not what you know. So make sure you know some people and reach out to people, and don't be afraid to do that, because as long as you're not asking me to do a lot of stuff for free, but you're just asking me a question where you've shown a bit of interest in my training philosophy, you've read my blog, or you've seen something I've written about, I'm more than likely going to write back to you because you've shown an interest in it. So people will reach out to you if you ask a smart question that shows you've actually put a bit of an effort into learning about their training philosophy, because ultimately most of us who've got good values, we want to share, and we're happy to write back and email, respond and things like that. So don't be surprised if you reach out to an experienced coach, you might get a reply. And then the last thing is, if you are someone who you believe to be naturally more introverted as opposed to someone who's outwardly got more of a coaching presence, go and find someone who can actually help you role model those behaviours, because another classic cliche line, I like a cliche, is you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And in the interviews, when I do a practical interview, I'm looking for someone who can create an environment, who's got presence, who's got an authoritative but likeable style. I'm asking for a lot of things now, aren't I?
Yeah.
And can go out and give me that impression immediately. And it takes a bit of confidence, but it is also a skill. And if you can go out and, that's like, we talk about Ben Haney, because he's got that, hasn't he, kind of nice balance between a bit of swag that people can kind of have a bit of rapport, a bit of a joke, a bit of banter, but he also knows how to give someone a bollocking. And I think also, he's got knowledge, and that's kind of like what we all aspire to do, and that's what I try and hopefully can say that I'm trying to do from my point of view as well. So I know I've done a bit of a rant there, but that's it pretty much.
Don't pump Ben's tyres up too much, mate. He can't afford to lose any more hair. He's run out.
Yeah.
No, but I agree. I think that's completely spot on. And ultimately, people love giving advice. And if you ask people for advice rather than an opportunity, then that might lead to an opportunity. But I think as you say, we're all happy to share, as long as it's done in an appropriate, professional, humble and respectable way. Like we're all busy people, but we're happy to help where we can.
Yeah.
So just to kind of wrap up, Daz, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you? How can they get hold of you?
Yeah, so I'm not kind of a prolific social media junkie, but I'll do my best. If you do use Twitter or Instagram, my handle is at APA Coach Daz. So you can definitely message me there. Email is daz@apacoaching.co.uk. So happy to receive some emails. And as far as just if it's all right, just to plug something that's coming up.
Yeah, of course.
I'm doing a speed workshop on June the 3rd, and I've got a few guests and it's going to be, if I'm honest, it's kind of built around tennis, and obviously we're looking at how to train speed through the entire physical development journey. So I've got one of my colleagues, Robert Nayans, is going to be coming in and talking about 10 and under, and looking specifically at coordination and decision making. I'm going to be doing the 14 and under, so that transition between child and adult, that adolescent period, and what does speed look like there. And then my colleague Howard Green, who's the head of S&C at Bolton Tennis Academy, he's going to be talking about how he coaches more specific elements of footwork and sport-specific speed to cover the entire spectrum. And it's a Sunday, June the 3rd, and if you want to check out the details of that, either email me or you can find it on the website, which is www.athleticperformanceacademy.co.uk.
Daz, I'll make sure I put links to that in the show notes, so people can directly access that. But that's quality. Brill. Well, look, I've got to run off to London Marathon now. I've got a couple of clients who've run it today, and I don't know how they've got on. I'm pretty sure they're going to need some intense recovery work, so I'm going to try and go and help them out. I won't take any more of your Sunday up, mate, especially when the rare opportunity to enjoy the sunshine. But again, thanks very much for your time, mate. Really, really appreciate you coming on, and hope to stay in touch and keep chewing the fat, and for the next for the rest of the year. So thanks for your time.
Always, buddy. And let me know when it's up and running and it's up live, so I can go and check it out, because it'd be interested just to send this podcast the way of some of my coaches.
Thanks for listening to the 5th episode. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please don't hesitate to leave us a rating or review on your listening platform of choice. If you haven't already, please check out our website. We have weekly blogs on our blog page. You can sign up to our monthly newsletter via our sign up page. Our online store consists of personal coach, training programs, nutrition plans, interactive training systems, toolbox, and coming very soon, membership packages. We also have several social media platforms: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Links to all these can be found at the bottom of every page on our website or via any search engine. That's all for now. Until next time, take care.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.